I'm ready, Rabotai. There's a lot to talk about. Okay, we'll get started. The first thing that we want to understand, because we have these incredible days upon us. We have the days of Parashat Zachor, of course the days of Purim, everybody's preparing, getting ready. I'm sure you guys have all these great ideas and probably have already done certain things in the school, I assume, by Rosh Chodesh Adar. Yeah?
That's why we're here. We did things. We stayed in school late and they basically messed it up.
Oh, very good. So you're able to come here. So you're zochet to mitzvah. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah. From one mitzvah to another mitzvah. Baruch Hashem. Just keep our place safe, you know? don't do anything here. We're not ready for it yet. But the Adar is a beautiful time. Parashat Zachor is obviously a very important mitzvah. And then we have Purim. So let's first understand Zachor. We'll start with that. And obviously it's very connected to Purim. But what is this whole idea of Zachor Asher Asa Lecha Amalek? Every single year I have an obligation to remember what Amalek did. But I remember from last year. And I remember from the year before. And I remember from the year before. So what's all this remembering? Like, how forgetful are we? That we have to constantly remember what Amalek did to us. And it's pretty extreme because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is something we're going to need to elaborate on, especially when we're discussing Purim, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu vowed to wage a war, Milchama LaHashem ba'Amalek, a war against Amalek, midor dor, every generation. There's a battle against Amalek, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes so far as to say, his throne is not complete, his name is not complete, until Amalek is defeated. Whoa, what is all this like very extreme language about defeating Amalek and fighting this battle to the end of time? Like, it sounds way out there. How do we explain this? So we start slow. We're going to start with the story. Because I know Shlomo over there likes stories, right, Shlomo? You love stories. So the story goes like this. As Galinsky would say very nicely, Lo ha-midrash ikar ela ha-ma'aseh. The midrash is not the ikar. What a person learns, the ma'aseh. Everybody wants to hear a good ma'aseh. So here's the story that happened in Yerushalayim. This story is said over by Rabbi Goel El-Karif. Story went with a family that was a very prestigious family in Yerushalayim. And, a very high-level family. There's a lot of pressure. I don't know how many people realize that, but when you come from a family of big rabbanim and everybody talks about this rabbi, and then he has children, and they expect that the children act in a certain way, and all the other brothers are, finishing gemarot and writing sfarim, and you're sort of there. There was one person in the family that was a little bit lagging behind, felt the pressure, and slowly but surely started going downhill. And in Hebrew, the terminology is called pirot noshrim, the fruits that start to wither away. That's the euphemism that is used. And shovavnikim, they're like sort of starting to rebel. They started going downhill. They didn't know what to do. So they decided they're going to take him to Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter, Shalita of Yerushalayim. And he was the Rav of the Hasidim, the Breslover Hasidim. He was a big Rav, Talmid Chacham Uvhak. And the fellow is maybe in his 15s, 18s. He turns to this big Rav and he says to him, I want to ask a question. He says, of course, ask. He says, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to care about me? What difference does it make to Hashem if I'm religious, shomer Torah mitzvot, or I just do things that I like to do and might not be so religious? What difference does it make to Hashem? Does he really care about me? And why would he be interested in me? He has all these great tzaddikim. We live in Yerushalayim. He has great people, rabbanim, a whole entire communities that keep Torah and mitzvot. So what if I don't keep? But there's so many other people, like, who cares? Why would he be so interested? And the Rebbe looks at him and he says to him, Parashat Zachor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu fought against Amalek. What was the big crime that we read that Amalek committed against Am Yisrael? So let's see what it says. Asher karecha baderech, vayzanev becha, kol hanecheshalim acharecha. Those are the words of Parashat Zachor. Now what does that mean? It says that Am Yisrael left Mitzrayim, and Amalek came into the scene, ready for war. And we know one thing about Am Yisrael is that they were fortified. They had something better than the Iron Dome. They had what was called Ananei Kavod. Ananei Kavod was not 90%, not 95%, it was 100%. You shoot an arrow, the arrow made a U-turn, and it would go back and hit the enemies. So not only did it protect them, it created a deterrence because nobody wanted to shoot arrows since it would be fired right back. It's kind of like the Hamas rockets, they shoot them up and then they just like kind of turns around and hits their own hospitals and hits their own people. It was like that. It was mamash nisim v'niflaot. But the Ananei Kavod were extremely special. So how did Amalek wage a war against Am Yisrael when there's Ananei Kavod protecting the nation? The answer is they didn't. There was no war inside the Ananei Kavod. What was happening is that there were some Jews that were not invited to come to the Ananei Kavod. They're called the ones that were Vayzanev becha kol hanecheshalim acharecha, the ones that were lagging behind. Why? Because they didn't fully remove their idol worshipping. They weren't exactly part of the Am Yisrael. They were Erev Rav. They only came out, but they didn't really keep the Torah. They didn't really believe only in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They had backups of this Avodah Zarah, that Avodah Zarah. They weren't invited into the camp of Am Yisrael, and therefore they would have to be outside the Ananei Kavod. The great crime of Amalek wasn't that they fought Am Yisrael, is that they fought those individuals that were outside the camps, the few that were there, that were vulnerable, and they attacked them. And to that, you know what Hashem says to Moshe? Moshe, make sure you gather Yoshua bin Nun and take the army and go out to war and fight against Amalek, chase after them, defeat them, wipe them out. Why? Because there's a minority in Am Yisrael that's like the less from, the not so religious people, the people that were outcast as Am Yisrael, were attacked by Amalek. From today on, we wage war against Amalek. We will not cease until every single one of them is dead. What is HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling us with this? That means the people that are so far behind in Am Yisrael, Hashem is so fixated on them. He cares so much about them that He pays attention to those individuals, so much so that the rest of Am Yisrael has to wage a war against the nation, and my throne will not be complete, and my name will not be complete until they're defeated. But they attacked the worst of the Jews. They didn't even attack the best. They attacked the people that were the most vulnerable, that were left out. Yeah, but my name can't be complete, and we will wage war until they're dead. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares. So the Rebbe turns, and he says, what's the Musar Haskel? What's the lesson here to be learned? And he says, it's a great lesson. HaKadosh Baruch Hu views as valuable, cares for all of the people that are left behind, even those that have, Avodah Zarah in their midst, even those that are not exactly Ovedet HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore every single Jew has to remember for the rest of time what Amalek did to remind us how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares about every individual. And that means to say that no matter who the person is, whether in this room, or whether outside this room, or whether in the Ananei Kavod, outside the Ananei Kavod, a person who's keeping Torah mitzvot to the highest level, a person who's not so careful with Torah mitzvot, no person in Am Yisrael could say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need me. He has everybody else, and they're already great people, and He can rely on them, and there's the Baba Saris of the world, and there's the Rebbes, and the great Rabbi Leeor and the Rabbi Moshes of the world. He doesn't need me. And therefore, why would He care what I do or what I don't do in the privacy of my own home and my keeping of Torah mitzvot? No. He cares, and He's fixated, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves, and makes sure. And if something happens wrong and you're attacked, it's like the whole nation is attacked, the heart of Am Yisrael is attacked. And that's the level that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to remember on a yearly basis. So, basically, He told him, the Rebbe, cut the nonsense. It's not true. Hashem loves you, Hashem cares about you, and don't fall into depression, and don't pretend like your actions don't matter. And he heard that was very much mechazek him. It gave him strength to continue to realize that he really is part of this nation. He's not like everybody else. He doesn't have to mimic everyone, but on his own level, he'll rise himself and pick himself up and get to greater and greater heights. We talk about the Megillah, and one of the things we want to understand and really get is the whole nature. As I started with the question, this is a very important question, is what is this whole battle against Amalek? At the end of the day, I care much about halacha lema'aseh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu testifies this battle is for the rest of time. It's not supposed to end. It doesn't have an expiration date. The expiration date will be when the final Geulah comes, when Mashiach comes, like we say in the Tefillah, Bayom Hahu Yeh Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. That means until that date, where we have Bet HaMikdash and the whole world recognizes HaKadosh Baruch Hu and everything else, there's going to be a raging battle against Amalek. The only problem is, it doesn't seem like it's in practice at all. Like, I don't even know a single Amaleki, and neither does anybody. There isn't a single person in the world that you could say he is an Amalek and therefore kill him and fight a war against him. Let alone a nation of Amalek, you could forget about it. So this whole thing seems to be very impractical, not halacha lema'aseh. At the same time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you have to remember this for all the generations, because I have waged a war until the end of time. How does that reconcile? Who am I fighting? Who am I destroying? Who am I beating up? There's nobody there. There's no one to attack. I should go ahead and kill a Nazi? Like, what am I supposed to do? Even Nazi, we don't know that he's Amalek. Maybe he's from Amalek, maybe he's not from Amalek. You can't kill anybody because you don't know for sure. Gemara already said 2,000 years ago. Sancheriv came along and bilbelet kol ha'umot. Sancheriv took this nation, moved them there, took half of that nation, moved them here. He went ahead and made a big melting pot. Already 2,000 years ago this happened, 3,000 years ago. Let alone today, forget about it. There's no way to identify any human being as being part of Amalek, not being part of Amalek. And therefore, like, what are we doing exactly? What are we trying to remember? What are we waging a war against? Who are we fighting? What's going on? So this is something that needs clarification. We need to know why this is so important to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and why, what is this battle? What's going on? So to understand this fully, I always love to get into the Midrashim. There's a very beautiful Midrash that fills in a lot of the details the Megillah of Megillat Esther doesn't tell. So now we're moving ahead. I'm not going to talk about Amalek as the nation that when the Jews left Egypt, but more about Haman, who was obviously a very important figure of the nation of Amalek. So Haman, we know, convinces Achashverosh, the big anti-Semite, together with the big anti-Semite, right? Both of them were terrible. And Haman convinced him, didn't take much convincing. Achashverosh, there is a nation, Yeshno Am Echad Mefuzar Umforan Ben Ha'amim B'chol Medinot Malchutecha. They're different than everybody else. We need to destroy them. We need to get rid of them. Holocaust 1.0, right? Before Holocaust 2.0, with Yimach Shemo V'Zichro Hitler, and the terrible destruction that happened, Haman was the first to really go on record and to attempt to destroy and annihilate the final solution, every single Jew, men, women, children. That was Haman. Achashverosh says, agreed. And then they write these letters, and they send them to 127 provinces. But it does not say fully, it's only very vague. The Megillah is very vague in what it actually said in the letters to get 127 nations riled up and convince provinces to fight against the Jews and eradicate the Jews. You're trying to convince people to actually join along in the fight. So the Midrash fills in this detail, and it's what an incredible Midrash. I'm going to read it inside and translate because it's so powerful. I can't say it outside with giving it the beauty that the words contain, and line by line. So I'm going to say it from the start in Hebrew, and then I'll translate. Katvu be'otani garot. What was written in those letters? Shalom lachem aden cheker yodea lachem she'adam echad yesh benenu v'lo mi mekomenu. So first the letter starts off, peace unto you, province so and so. There is a singular person that is amongst us, that is not a countryman per se. He is a foreigner, you could call him. However, he is from the kingship, line of kings, and from the Zera, from the children of Amalek, Umigidolei Adol, a leader of the generation, and his name is Haman, and he has asked of us, meaning of Achashverosh, She'ela ktana v'kala, a small, little, tiny request to only annihilate a single nation, right? Yesh benenu, there's one nation, Nivzeh, that is Nivzeh, what's the right word? Reviled amongst all the other nations, looked down upon, Mikol ha'amim, from everybody else. And their opinions about themselves is so high up. They regard themselves, what today is called, like they call it white supremacy, Jewish supremacy. They view themselves so highly, but the truth of the matter is they're such a lowly nation, and they only seek our evil. They look to see the bad in us. They look to harm us. They're constantly cursing the king in their mouths, in their language. And what are the curse that they say about the kings? They quote psukim. Hashem melech olam va'ed avedu goyim me'artzo. That the goyim, all of the nations, should be avedu, should be destroyed from his land. So they want the destruction of all the nations. Ve'od omrim. La'asot nekama bagoyim tochichot baleumim, to take revenge against all the nations. So they're quoting sources, selective sources from Tehillim, from different source, to point out the negativity of the Jews. Just a very striking resemblance. What this midrash was written 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, about what happened and what Haman was saying. Literally, we see that today. They take verses from the Torah and they attribute it to the Jews. They've done this for hundreds and hundreds of years, where they take a Gemara over here, a Pasuk over here, and they say, they see the Jews are not loyal, they're disloyal to whatever country they're in. Fill in the blank. If they lived in communist Russia, they'll say, oh, no, they're Nazis. If they lived in Nazi Germany, oh, they're communists. Oh, if they live over here, oh, no, they're Zionists. Over here, oh, the other way. They're Netulikat. They always find a way. The Jewish people is always the scapegoat, the person that doesn't fit in. He's always the other side, the robbers, the crooks, the cheats. And then they quote sources from the Torah that are obviously selectively explained and edited in order to fit the narrative that they're looking forward. Kofrim b'mi she'asa lahem tova. Not only that, says Haman through Achashverosh, he says that they are very ingrateful. They don't recognize the good of all those that have done to them. Let me show you as an example. Now he points, now this is the ultimate rewriting of history. A master, Haman is a master of rewriting of history. Listen to how he says over, it's going to be Pesach is in a month, right? We say over the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, an incredible story how Am Yisrael was saved and rescued from an oppressor, and they were victims and they were harmed, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved them. Listen to Haman's rendition of Pesach, all right? This is his Haggadah Shel Pesach, right now. Bo'u me'oto ani Paro, poor Paro, misken, what a victim Paro was. Look what the Jews did to him. They went down to Egypt, this Jewish nation, and he accepted them with open arms. He welcomed them. He put them in the best land, and he took care of them when there was a famine all over the world. He supported them. V'chinam kol tuv be'artzo, and he treated them like royalty in the castle, in the palace. So he had something that he needed to be built. He wanted to build. He likes buildings. Hayu bonim sham bechol zot lo haya yachol lahem, and they were building for him. He hired them to build, and he couldn't handle them. Hayu lo livnot. I read that. Velo od ela shebau be'alila. So they started complaining to Paro. Amru lo lizboach Eloheinu. We don't like this building thing. We don't like the deal you made with us. So we want to leave and make sacrifices. We want to take an extended vacation. And Paro told them, why should I give you a vacation? You take days off already. Why should I give you a vacation? Na'azov, kach nashuv im ritzoncha, shirenu kerek. And the Jews didn't just want to leave. They wanted to borrow his gold, borrow his silver, borrow their clothing. And you know what? The Egyptians were so kind-hearted that even though it made no sense for them to do that, but they said, we're going to take care of you. We're going to be the compassionate ones. We're going to be the better people, and we're going to give you the gold. We're going to let you borrow the silver. We're going to let you borrow the clothing. We're going to give you the animals. Look how nice the Egyptians were. And what did those rotten Jews do? They left. They took the gold. They took the silver, and they stole it and ran away. Can you believe it? After all that Paro did for them, Borchim. So naturally, Paro, what is he going to do? He's going to chase after them. Halach acharehem le'ashiv et mamono. In order to get his money back, they stole. It was a complete fraud the Jewish people committed. So there was one man, an evil man, and his name was Moshe ben Amram, and he was a big magician. Uvecheshafav natal makel echad. He took a staff and he whispered something, and that staff, which was a magical staff, somehow managed to hit the sea and split it, and dry land emerged. And they entered into the Yabasha, into the land, the land in between the water, and they all passed through. Ve'ni yodea b'ma. I don't know how they pulled it off, but it was some expert magic over here. How did they get the water to dry up and then to pass through it? But Paro sees this, and he enters after them to get back his money. He just wants his own money. And I don't know why he entered, what caused him, what evil spirit came upon him to do something that foolish and to enter the waters. I don't know how they got him to do that. Vinitbahu, and he was drowned, and his whole nation and his whole army went sinking in the sea. And they did not remember the good that he did for them. Look how much ingratitude this nation has. Wow, what a revision of history, huh? It's unbelievable. It's pretty convincing. You know, you hear this story, you're like, maybe I never thought of it that way, right? And look at my great-grandfather who stood up, saw the injustice that was happening, kind of like the UN. Amalek sees the injustice, the genocide that was taking place over here by the Jews, and he decided that he's not going to stand for this, and it's not appropriate and not proper the way the Jews treated Egyptians. So what does he do? Of course, he doesn't want to do anything on his own. So he goes to consult the wisest of men at the time, Bil'am Harasha. And he turns to Bil'am to consult what should be done for this great injustice that happened. He says, listen, he tells them, your advice is always successful. Amar lo, says Bil'am, re'eh ma asu, u'ma zo leMitzrayim, she'asu lahem kama tovot. So he says, look what they did to the Egyptians, who did so much good for them. Imagine what they're going to do to the other nations that didn't do good for them. If a nation, Kal Vachomer, that did so much for them, they went and destroyed them, what are they going to do? How much cruelty are they going to show all the other nations? So he says, Alachad kama v'chama, hey achata yo'atzani, give me some advice. Amalo Bil'am, lech ve'asei mahem milchama. Go wage war against them. Meaning Amalek is saying, I didn't do this because I wanted to. I got this because that was the advice of the greatest person of the generation who was telling me this is what I must do. It was conferred upon me, this mission to eradicate the Jewish people. If you don't do it, then you won't ever be able to wage war against them because they are dependent on the zechut of Avraham Avinu. And you are also, Amalek was a descendant of Avraham Avinu, also can wage a war against them. So you can find success where others are not going to succeed. So what does this Moshe, this leader, do? Again, this is all in the letter. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He had one student who was a rabid and cruel person. His name was Yoshua bin Nun. Haya achzari ad meod. You could not even sense any compassion with this. Lo haya lo rachamim. He had no mercy on anything. Amar lo oto Moshe. So that Moshe turns to his student and he says, go and choose an entire army and fight against Amalek. And I didn't know what kind of people he chose. People that were magicians, they soldiers. What were they? Oton Moshe natal makel beyado. Moshe takes a staff, and I didn't know how he did it, but he went ahead. Once Amalek came, lachash alehem, he went and he muttered some things on his staff, verafu yedehem, and the armies of Amalek just collapsed before them, and somehow they managed to defeat great armies with relative ease, with Moshe Rabbeinu just whispering things. It didn't end over there. Then the Jewish people went in the desert and encountered giants of Sichon and Og, Giborei Arzenu, the great, courageous leaders, the protectors of the land. Sichon and Og was the security team of all of Eretz Yisrael, because you could not enter Eretz Yisrael except through the lands of Sichon and Og, and they were giants, and they were paid watchmen to protect all the other nations. And Moshe Rabbeinu and his armies, they come, and they went ahead and wiped him out. And they took him down. Not a single soul was able to stand before Og and Sichon, these giants. And somehow, I don't know how they managed to kill them. And they went and they conquered Malchei Midian, and they killed them. And what did that student of Yoshua do with his cruelty? Not only did he steal and embezzle all the lands of the nations, 31 kings were all killed by Yoshua bin Nun. He executed them with cruelty, no compassion, no care, no justice, no jury, no anything. And he stole their lands and divided it amongst his people. How could he do such a thing? And then a king named Sisra saw this injustice and went to attack them. And he wiped them out with, again, magics through Nachal Kishon, through a stream that went and washed up all the armies. And then there was a king whose name was Shaul, and he fought against my great-grandfather, Ve'arag mehem, and he killed hundreds of thousands of expert troopers and soldiers, Ve'lo chamal, and he had no compassion, he killed children, he killed. Is there more cruelty than that? More achzariyut? Not even the elders, not even the women. He killed everybody. And then there was a fellow named Shmuel that went and killed an elder man of the Jewish people. You would think an elder man would have compassion. And he killed my great-grandfather in the most cruel way unimaginable. He sliced him up, mamash like you would slice up a watermelon. And he killed him. This is a normal nation? He turns to him, and then they had a David ben Yishai, and he was killing all over the place. He fought wars over here, he fought wars over here, he was killing this, he made a whole balagan, there was no peace in his time. And Isha lo ichya David HaMelech killed men and women. And then Shlomo his son built this Bet HaMikdash, and I don't know what they do in there, some magical things they do inside of there, and all these types of witchcrafts, and in the meantime they were destroying the world. Until they themselves had so much of an abundance of good that they became complacent, talking about the Jewish people. And Mirov Tovah, they rebelled against their own gods. Mardu be'elohehem, he calls them gods. It's obfuscating. Ve'od she'iskin oto Eloah, and that God of theirs, now he changed to God. He says he became old already. Uva Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar came, and all of a sudden he's not the invincible God that he was in Egypt. Now Nebuchadnezzar was able to take him out and destroy his temple and burn and exile and bring him into this land of Shushan and of all the provinces, Me'od Vad Kush. And now Nebuchadnezzar brought us a problem of having all of these Jews that are so dangerous and so vile and so anti-humanity. And even now in exile, they still ridicule us and they still make fun of our religions. So we all agreed to finally get rid of this nation. And we decided based on lots, what day should be chosen. It was all done professionally, the 13th of Adar. ועכשיו, כשיגיעו אליכם מגרות הללו, and these letters come, תהיו מזומנים לאותו היום, you be ready. Once you receive these letters that they actually left around Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, right? They were written in Nisan, but they were sent out the months of Sivan, and that's really when it became public knowledge. That's about, what is that? You're talking about 10 months before actually Adar. So there was plenty of time ahead in advance to prepare for that day. And the letters were sent. Shlosha Asar Bo, on the 13th of Adar, that's when the war is going to start. And your job is to simply do small tasks, just wipe out all the Jews, men, women, and children. And don't leave anybody on that day. Period. Thank you very much. We now turn to the commercials. Right. So that was the letter of Haman HaRasha. Now, Rabotai, this letter is very important, not just for the story of it and the just interesting part of it, but just realizing that there's something very thematic in how Haman wrote the letter. Everything was somehow. Everything that he could explain through magic, it was There's like no HaKadosh Baruch Hu in any of this. There's no proper perspective. There's no putting things and framing them correctly. It's selecting facts over here, selecting facts over there. The only time he introduced HaKadosh Baruch Hu was at the very end to say, oh, and by the way, the God that they have was weak and old and was already destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. That is the way of Amalek. Amalek will say everything, just not HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not an attack on Am Yisrael. The war of Amalek is different than every other war because Amalek does not seek to destroy a people. He seeks to wage war against Hashem. And the representation of Hashem in this world is a people. It's a war against God. And this is the way to wage it against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the nature of Amalek. When Amalek describes Yetziat Mitzrayim, there isn't a mention of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's this person, it's magic, it happened to be, I'm not sure, I can't explain this one, but there must be some sort of explanation. We'll just leave it a question mark. It's all a coincidence. It happened to be. Asher karecha baderech. Everything was simply by accident. It must have happened somehow. There must be some sort of explanation to it. What? God? No. Chas v'shalom. Providence, that there's direction, that there's somebody that leads the chaos, that has a plan and has a vision, is in charge of the world? No, that we don't accept. That is the root of Amalek. So is it true that today we don't have a nation of Amalek? True, absolutely. There isn't a singular person in the world that is identifiably Amalek. Even with DNA testing and even with all these things. As a matter of fact, the Gemara talks about DNA testing will never work because there were actually people that were descendants of Haman that were converted, became part of Am Yisrael, and became great Rabbanim that taught Torah in Bnei Brak. So DNA testing is not going to work to identify who is considered part of Amalek, who is not considered part of Amalek. At what point did he get to... None of that, we're not going to know until the times of Eliyahu Navi. So what is this big battle and war that we're waging? It's a war against the philosophy of Amalek. Amalek's philosophy is Asher karecha baderech. There is such a thing as coincidence, and that runs the world. The world runs on a practical level. Iran makes a decision, the Jewish people make a decision, it happens to be that we have better technology, it happens to be that our weapons are like this, it happens to be that they hate us, it happens to be, everything is a happens to be. There is no HaKadosh Baruch Hu that runs the show, it's out of the picture. Everything is explained. The day of the weather is because there happens to have been clouds. There was a little bit of winds, so now the clouds dissipated. That's the nature of Amalek. And Am Yisrael is exactly the opposite. Everything about Am Yisrael is that it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu that runs the world, and it's singularly Hashem Echad. There's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There isn't mazalot, there isn't this, there isn't chances and coincidences and black magic. And all. No. It's all Hashem. Hashem made the famine. Hashem brought in a person named Yosef to take care of the famine. It wasn't a coincidence. He wasn't an Egyptian. He was a Jewish person. He was the one that saved Egypt. He was the one that supported Am Yisrael. He was Egypt benefited because of the Jewish people. They deserved gratitude. It wasn't Am Yisrael that was the aggressor. It was Paro that was the aggressor. Am Yisrael was simply taking money that they deserved because they were worked. Facts that were missing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that took them out of Egypt, not their own volition. Kriyat Yam Suf was a mission of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not of Paro. The defeating of those nations was because they deserved to be defeated, since they were all evil people that did terrible things that wage war against HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well, and therefore deserved to be wiped out. And Am Yisrael simply carried out that mission. That is the nature of the fight between the Jewish people and Amalek. So you don't need a people to fight. The waging of the war against Amalek is every generation, because in every generation, the denialism of HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists and is alive and well. And when that gets defeated, that will be the Bayom Ha'u Yeh Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad, which makes sense right before it says Vayavo Amalek, Vayilachem im Yisrael b'Fidim. The pasuk right before that, if you look carefully in the Chumash, you'll see in Parashat Beshalach, it says Hayesh Hashem b'kirbenu im ayin. The minute Am Yisrael asked a simple question, is Hashem with us Bekirbenu, is he with us or is he not with us? Next words, Vayavo Amalek, Vaylachem Yisrael birfidim. The battle of Amalek is the weakness of Am Yisrael, the Achilles heel of Am Yisrael. When we say, where is Hashem? When we don't recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we don't put HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives, all of a sudden Amalek starts to attack. And we see this over and over and over again when Am Yisrael gets complacent and forgets about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then Hashem sends enemies. And instead of saying, well, what's going on? Why is Hashem sending this problem to us? How do we fix it? How do we solve it? We start turning to the politicians. We start turning to Trump. We start saying, okay, we got to solve it by negotiating with Iran and making sure that we have cutting edge weapons and not allowing them to get nuclear weapons. And we never actually, we think like Amalek sometimes. Mamash, it's unfortunate to say, but it's the thought process of Amalek. And it's not the thought process that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted when he brought the problem in the first place. All of the politics, all of the news, all of the problems are there because of Hayesh Hashem Bekirbenu im Ayin. The minute that we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How did Am Yisrael beat Amalek in the times of Moshe? Very simple. Moshe Rabbeinu ve'aya kasher yarim Moshe et yadav ve'gavar Yisrael ve'chasher yaniach yadav ve'gavar Amalek. When Moshe Rabbeinu picked up his hands, Am Yisrael started winning. And the Gemara says, ve'chi yadav shel Moshe notzchot milchama. The hands, the picking up of the hands of Moshe is what wins wars. That's how you win wars. Ela bizman sheYisrael nosim eneim lamarom. When Am Yisrael turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the hands being raised means Am Yisrael is praying and looking at Hashem and realizing that Hashem is the one that's in charge and turning to Him. Then Am Yisrael defeats Amalek. And when we don't do that, then we lose to Amalek. That is the success of Am Yisrael. So when we have enemies like Iran, the answer isn't turn to the IDF, let's recruit more Ben Yeshivas, let's make sure there's more Bnei Torah in the army, let's make sure the army has all the F-16s, let's turn to America and make sure that we're protected. No, the answer is you turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you fast, and you do tshuva, and you say, how do I make my life better? How do I make my community better? How do I make Am Yisrael better? And then you defeat Amalek. And that's what Am Yisrael did on Purim. You don't see that they picked up weapons. Which weapons did they pick up? They picked up swords? They picked up guns? What did they do? When they heard there was a gzerah, they tried to assassinate Haman. What did they try to do? They said 3 days of tshuva, 3 days of Torah. What brought about the downfall of Haman? What brought it about? We'll see. 2 seconds. 1 second. I'll tell you right now. There's a midrash. This is incredible midrash. How close was Am Yisrael to not having Purim? People don't appreciate how much of a hairline the difference between having a Purim and having a Holocaust was 2,000 years ago. It was a hairline. It was mamash. We were saved very much on the razor's edge. We were going to be destroyed. This was not a question of, okay, the ending is going to be good, and just a question of fill in the details. This was a story that we were on the cliff, and there was one factor that changed it all. And the Midrash makes this absolutely clear. What happened was, now we go back to the Megillah again. The beginning of the Megillah starts off, and there's a reason it starts off, with the party of Achashverosh, which seems like it has nothing to do with the Megillah, except the Chachamim understood that if it's in the Megillah, that must be important to all of the backdrop. And the reason it's important is because when this party was set up, its whole purpose was to get Am Yisrael to sin. And this is what the Jews failed to see. The setup of all of this was so that the Jewish people will come and they will start slow. First they'll eat, then they'll get a little comfortable, then they'll drink a little bit, and then they'll feel very good. And then Achashverosh will get them to sin with the worst sins possible. Because once you're vulnerable, and once you've gotten out of your element, and you're in a different territory, a different place, in the palace of the king, and all this stuff is going on around you, it's going to be very hard, especially when there's alcohol in your system, to control yourself. And that is exactly what the plan was. And who knew this plan? The great people of Am Yisrael. Mordechai understood from day one what the whole purpose of this was to bring Am Yisrael down, to bring them to a point of defeat, to be able to defeat them, just like in the times of Bil'am HaRasha, where the whole ploy was get them to sin, and then you'll be able to kill them. And bimit, 24,000 people died in the times of the desert, which was the highest number of death ever Even Chet HaEgel only had 3,000 people that died. 24,000 people died, worse than any other time in Am Yisrael. Why? Because of a simple thing. Elohem shel elu soneh zima. Hashem hates immorality, and it eventually got to that because it started small and it ended up big. Which again is, you can make assessments for yourself. What the Seudat HaChashverosh back then, it required you to go to a party. Today, the Seudat HaChashverosh is on the Netflix and the social medias and all these other things that have totally inappropriate content. And you start from small, and then you go to big, and then you get bigger, and then it becomes Elohem shel elu soneh zima. It's the same plan. It's just in a different format, but exactly the same structure. And Mordechai picked it up back then, and the great Gedolei Ador picked it up today as well. Mordechai saw right through it. He said, Am Yisrael, nobody's allowed to go to this party. Of course, the great tzaddikim listened, and the rest of the people didn't listen. And I think it says like 18,000 people. I might not be getting the right number, but it says 18,000 people, 18,500 people went to the party of Achashverosh. Jews went to the party of Achashverosh, and they, of course, one thing led to the next, and did things that were mikalkel, that they were destroying themselves, their souls, and along with that, all of Am Yisrael. Yeah, question?
These 18,000 people that are all from Shushan?
It's not clear. It's not clear if they were all from Shushan. It looks like they were from... the Gemara does say that it was the people of Shushan that sinned in the party of Shushan. That's the story with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Gemara talks about. So it does seem like maybe they were either Shushan or the surrounding areas of Shushan, not necessarily all of Am Yisrael. So then the Gemara asked, so why was everybody else punished? There were other crimes as well. But that was definitely the final straw that broke the camel's back, was that sin. Now, at that point, once they did that sin, the Satan had free reign. So he comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lelamed alechem kategoria. So it says over here, miyad, immediately as they sinned, amad Satan v'ilshim alehem. The Satan goes to Hashem and he starts speaking negatively. Ifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar lefanav, ribono shel olam, Hashem, creator of heaven and earth. Ad matay tidbak b'umazol. What are you doing with this nation? What are you doing with them? How long do you want to keep them? Hem mafrishim livavam ve'emunatam mimcha. They are not loyal to you. They separate from you, and you keep being loyal to them. Im ritzoncha, if it seems good with you, abed umazol min ha'olam. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. Look how disloyal these people are. Ki enam ba'im b'tshuva lefanecha. They don't want to do tshuva about what they did. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, listen to the response, more scary than the Kitrug. Hashem says, Torah matehei alea. Hashem says, what's going to be with the Torah? Now, why I say it's more scary? It means HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, without the Torah, b'chlal, forget it. I agree with you. They deserve to be totally destroyed, but there's a problem. If there's no Am Yisrael, there's not going to be Torah, and then what is going to be with the world? That was what was holding back Hashem. Amar lefanav, so says the Satan, he's good at this, right? Ribono shel olam, don't worry about the Torah. Tistapik ba'ilyonim. There won't be Torah in this world. All right, not so bad. They'll have the malachim will have the Torah. They'll keep the Torah. They'll do the Torah. They'll learn the Torah. The Torah will be up there. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, listen to what the Midrash says. Hishva da'ato limchot et Yisrael. He agreed with the Satan. It's time to get rid of this nation. Be'ota she'ah amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lama li umah? Why do we need a nation? That I did so many miracles. Muftai. To all of those that did evil to them, I did miracles to destroy those people, pave the path before them. I'll get rid of them. Who needs this nation? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Satan haveli Megillah. He turns to the Satan and he says, bring me a Megillah, bring me a letter. So I want a piece of paper, basically. Echtov alea kiliyah. I will write annihilation of the Jewish people. Be'ota she'ah halach Satan, hevi lo Megillah. So Satan went, good servant, and he gave him a contract. Katav alea miyad, and Hashem wrote on it kiliyah, annihilation for the Jewish people. It's a gzerah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's interesting because it parallels what happened in this world. What happens above parallels, because just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu took a letter and wrote a kiliyah, what happened in the olam hazeh? Achashverosh, who represents the kingship of Mehodu Vad Kush, he also took a letter and wrote on it the annihilation of all the Jewish people. So there was a parallel, what was happening in Shamayim to what was happening down here. And that's always the case. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always parallels to give us that window to realize, hey, things are not so good in Shamayim. Pay attention. So what happened in heaven? Listen to what happened. Look how Shamayim was moving up. It says the Torah started wearing sackcloth. The Torah started crying before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Malachei HaSharet, the angels, started screaming and crying. Amru lefanav ribono shel olam. What's going to happen if Am Yisrael is gone from the world? Anu lama anu tzrichim ba'olam. What are we going to be? What's going to be with us? If there's no world, then there's not going to be chukot shamayim v'aretz lo samti. Hen arelim tzaku chutza malachei shalom ba'ar yivkayun. So Psukim quoted. The sun and the moon went ahead and they stopped shining. Al bishsak shamayim. It says Eliyahu Navi started running. He ran to Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and he said to them, "How long are you going to be asleep? Matai tiyu redumim b'shena. Iatem mashkichim. Where are you paying attention? Look what's happening to your children." And he says to them, Eliyahu Navi explains, Malachei HaSharet, the sun and the moon, the stars, the mazalot, heaven and earth, all of the celestial beings and bodies and angels of above are crying with bitter tears because of what's happening, and you guys aren't doing anything. Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, get up and do something. So they said to Eliyahu Hanavi, they turned to Eliyahu Hanavi, why is this happening to Am Yisrael? What did they do? What was their crime? He said, because they enjoyed from the party of Achashverosh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided it's time to wipe them out. And to erase their names from the world. Amru lo, listen to this, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov say to Eliyahu Hanavi, Im hem avru al dat HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'nechtema gzeretam ma anu cholim la'asot. If they violated what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them and commanded them, and the decree was already written, what are we supposed to do? It is what it is. Eliyahu Navi hears this, and he turns away from them. Amar lo leMoshe. Eliyahu runs to Moshe. He says, Ero eneman, where is the shepherd, the trusted shepherd? Kama pa'amim amata ala peretz Yisrael. How many times did you defend Am Yisrael and you nullified decrees against the nation? We need your help. Amar lo Moshe, turns Moshe to Eliyahu. Is there anybody down there in the world that is Adam Kasher, that is a person of righteousness in the generation? So says Eliyahu, yes. There's a man named Mordechai. Says, okay, you go to Mordechai and you tell him that he prays down there and I'll pray up here, and together we'll pray and hopefully we'll be able to back off the decree. He does his job and he does his job. But before you go, says Moshe, I want you to find out one thing. Because Eliyahu turns to him and says, but the decree was already written. What tefillah? Decree is written. He says, what is it? Tell me. When Hashem wrote the decree, did he write it with clay or did he write it with blood? If he wrote it with clay, it could be rescinded. He wrote it with blood, there's nothing that could be done. Eliyahu went and checked and he said it was written with clay. It says written with clay, then go to Mordechai and tell him to start praying. And that's what happens. Mordechai yada et asher na'asa. Mordechai knew from who? From Eliyahu Navi, who came and told him about what was happening in Shamayim. Vaikra Mordechai et begadav. And he went and he told Esther and he tore his garments and he started with a tefillah and gathering, amassing all of Am Yisrael, lech kenos et kol haYehudim v'tzumu alai, and the fasting. Now, how did the decree actually get absolved? Because right now we're standing at a point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu determined it's over for Am Yisrael. They're done. Am Yisrael is done. It's not a joke, it's actually what was supposed to happen. What changed everything was what the Midrash says after Haman built the tree. Haman is on top of his game. Everything that he touches is gold. He's able to convince Achashverosh, he's able to rise to power, he's able to have everybody bowing down to him. The whole world is turned Haman, 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 Haman. He was on top of everything. And he says, enough of this Mordechai, I'm getting rid of him. And he builds the gallows, right? Ha'etz gavoa 50 amah. And then, uvaboker emol hamelech. This is the point that we're standing. This happens to be many of the commentaries learn it's Mamash Pesach. It's the night of Pesach that all of this is taking place. So 15th of Nisan, Am Yisrael is fasting. They've been fasting already for a few days. And now Haman says, when he comes before the children and he sees them learning in the Beit Midrash, he says, these ones that are learning, and they were in sackcloth and they were fasting, even little kids were fasting, and they were all crying. He went and he counted them. There were 22,000 kids, Tinokot Shel Bet Rabban, learning in the yeshivot. 22,000. He said, arrest them all. He took all of them, put them in chains, metal, iron chains, and he put them in jail. And he put guards to protect. And he said, Lemachar erog elu hatinokot. I'm going to kill these children first, and then I will hang Mordechai. And the mothers of the children came to bring them bread and water. And they would say to them, children, eat, our sons, we want you to eat before you die. So you shouldn't, at least don't die hungry, like they say today, last meal. The last meal, right? The last dinner. The children said, listen to what they said, Omrot lahem, benenu ichlu kodem shetamutu lemachar, velo tamutu berav, miyad hayu manichim yedeim al sefirim. They would put their hands on their sfarim, v'nishbaim b'chayei Mordechai, and they would take an oath in the life of Mordechai Rabbeinu, lo nochal velo nishte ela mitoch ta'anitenu namut. We'll die through fasting. Ga'u kulam bivchia. Everybody started crying. Ad she'alta shav'atam lamarom. The cries of the 22,000 children went up to the heavens. Shama Kadosh Baruch Hu kol b'chiyatam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears the crying. Kebishte sha'ot balayla. 2 hours into the night. Be'ota sha'a nitgargelu rachamav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears the crying of Am Yisrael, and He has mercy. Ve'amad mikiseh din ve'yashav bekiseh rachamim. He stands before the throne of mercy, from judgment to mercy. Amar ma kol gadol hazeh shani shomea. The sound that I'm hearing, what is this sound? Ki gedayim utelaim. Like the sound of goats, baby goats, utelaim, sheep. Which I just would like to point out is actually the two animals I use for Korban Pesach. Interesting. The night of Pesach has to do with Korban Pesach. Amad Moshe Rabbeinu lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe turns before Hashem, ve'amar ribono shel olam. It's not gedayim, it's not telaim, not sheep, not goats. Ela ktanei amecha, shem shiruim beta'anit shlosha yamim. They're fasting for 3 days, 3 nights. Lemachar rotzeh ha'oyev leshochatam ki gedayim utlaim. The enemy wants to slaughter them like Korban Pesach. Be'ota sha'a natal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that moment takes the letters, shegazar aleim, shayu chatumot bechotam shel tit, v'kara'am. And he tears them up. He hears the crying of Am Yisrael. That's what went ahead and rescinded the decree. It means the children, 22,000 children, who were willing to fast and didn't want to get, it's mashma, the fact that they said, we're going to continue fasting, we're going to die fasting, and they cried to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is what tipped the scale and saved all of Am Yisrael, which is incredible. That moment is what changed everything, and that's when the Megillah starts saying, Balayla ha'u nadida shenat hamelech. Everything turned on its head, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, Achashverosh is not going to sleep tonight, and we're going to find out about Mordechai, and then Haman is going to come, and he's going to come exactly at the right time, and Haman is going to take Mordechai. Instead of killing Mordechai, Mordechai is going to be ridden on a horse of the king, with the garments of the king, and V'na'afochu happens exactly at that moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepted the tefillah of the children of Am Yisrael that night. That's how powerful, and really how close the nation was to Rachmana litzlan, so close to destruction, and on the other hand, having this massive salvation of Am Yisrael. So, when we take a look at this and we say to ourselves, wow, this is incredible. The entire nation of Am Yisrael turned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with tshuva, and if they wouldn't have done that, it could have been utter destruction. But instead, they went ahead and they prayed, and they got together, and they really turned the tide, so be able to be matzliach, and to get to this point. All of that is the story, the great story of the Megillah, is a powerful lesson of how much the power of tshuva, ma'asim tovim, Am Yisrael turning back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is able to save the nation from serious crimes and sins. And this is This is what Am Yisrael is about. That is the power of what we're capable of doing. And the way to defeat Amalek is through that emunah, through that bitachon, and to turn all of the enemies into Am Yisrael into dust by doing this. Just like Haman was converted into nothing. Bizchut, the great nation of Am Yisrael. So Bezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh to see Yeshuot v'nehamot, to be matzliach, and to fight the war against Amalek. The defeating of Amalek has to come through that idea of Hashem Echad. Hashem is in charge of the world. We're servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and through that be matzliach b'chol ma'aseh yadenu. Amen ve'amen. Chazakim u'bruchim. Rabbi Hanina מהקשה אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא, זכור ישראל, לפיכך בא להם תורה מצוות, שנאמר, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה וידי יתגדל